candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light. Hello, lovelies. Today we're going to be taking a quick shufti at a supplement for Elfking, which I reviewed a while back. So if you want to know what the actual game itself is like, in terms of system and so on, toddle on back through the archives and look for Elfking in there. And so, a couple of things first, quickly. I'm curious, so please leave a comment if you have ever bought anything because I have reviewed it, or bought anything because I have advertised it on my channel, and please tell me which one. You know, I only advertise my own stuff at the moment, really. But even so, I'm curious if anyone has clicked through from the adverts or gone and found something from the little video adverts I put at the end. So I would just like to know. I want to know because I thought asking for hard copies of things to review would slow people down a bit, but instead it seems I get sent more more stuff. So that kind of backfired. So if you don't hear from me, my review pile has collapsed on top of me and crushed every bone in my body into powder. But anyway, Elfking, very briefly, in case you haven't seen the review of the system, it's a game in which you play sort of more Morcockian, immortal creatures, which is much more the old school interpretation of fairies as being these aloof, immortal things. A couple of things that are relevant and important about the game are that your fame kind of controls how powerful you are. So the more that your myth and your legend grows, the more powerful, the more influential, and so on you are. Now, this supplement is called The Day of 1,000 Nights. It is about a tournament. So there's like the shortest night, midsummer, made to last for over 1,000 nights by fairy magic. And this tournament takes place in a dreamland, a dream world, a common hallucination, if you will, between all the different elf lords. Now, tournaments are weirdly popular as an idea for games, and I'm not entirely sure they're that great. It sounds wonderful, and if you've recently watched A Knight's Tale or something, I can see why the appeal might be there. They're quite important in games like Pendragon, and there have been rules for tournaments in things like Dragon Warriors and so on, for example. But I have tended to find in practice they're not that hugely exciting, unfortunately, because a joust is all very formal and so on, and as a visual spectacle or something, if you see one being acted out, as happens at certain manor houses and so on here in the UK, or as part of special events, or if you go to, I don't know, medieval times or whatever, that's fantastically wonderful to watch in those settings. But in a role-playing game, it mostly comes down to roll a d20, add a score, whoever gets the highest wins. Not in this game necessarily, but in lots of other games. That's not terribly exciting, unfortunately. I almost feel like it might be better to approach something like a tournament as a set of mini games, each with their own rules, influenced by the normal tabletop rules, so that you could break out like a mini board game or something and play that to represent the jousting or the duels or whatever else. You can have a more deep and satisfying sort of experience playing that sort of thing. that would be my recommendation. I used to have a book of World War II war games, and like you would flip through it and you would have maps on one page or a 2-page spread and tokens which you would cut out and play, and each game had its own separate little rules that made it fun and interesting. So something like that, perhaps. Anyway, this does deal with some of that. I mean, you get the different factions and so on that are playing things out. The artwork is AI. That may be a deal breaker for you. Well, some of it is AI, some of it is AI assisted, some of it is normal hand-drawn art. They don't identify which is which, but for some people that's a deal breaker. For me, I think you would have a hard time finding people who can replicate that sort of 1970s art book look and feel that they have replicated so well in a lot of the images. So to a degree there's some sort of necessity that goes on here as well. But anyway, yeah, they've kind of dealt with the problem of tournaments, that they can be boring and just come down to a couple of rolls, by having other sort of sub-events which are more like mini or micro adventures. So as well as the jousting, which frankly is always a bit of a letdown in games, you have the Wizards tournament, you have a hunting quest, the Worm's Heart subquest, things like that. So what you can have instead of a more traditional staid normal sort of tournament is that you can have these sort of micro quests. And the other thing about this is it's very easy to just lift one of these micro quests and plant it in your game wherever you might want to put it. So yeah, they do seem to have dealt with the problem a little bit in that way, but you know, the traditional joust, which is meant to be the big visual spectacle and all that, it's a bit of a letdown, because it always is. It's not a problem with this game or this supplement in particular. We're looking at about 50 pages. There's the AI art, which again is going to be make and break for some people, not necessarily for me. Layout wise, like, I am a fan of clean layouts, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being simple, but this might be a little bit too simple for me. This isn't a problem in much of the book, though some more spot art in these gaps would have been nice to see. But in some of the pages, the statistics and so on are a little bit too spaced out. Like, you got double space. There's no need for that. You can compress that up and use the space better, and there's not enough differentiation between, you know, the titles, the stats, and the substats and so on. So just, I don't know. Like I say, I have nothing against clean layouts, but just this feels a bit empty and spacious, especially when you contrast it with the art, which, AI or not, is very evocative, very much of the time. You know, that 70s fantasy art feel. Alright, so in terms of style, I mean, they have the look, at least when it comes to the artwork, down pretty pat at this point. AI art might be a make or break for you, as I've said. For me, viewing this as a consumer, I like what they've done, and I think it looks good, and I do think it evokes that feel of a very particular time in fantasy art and publication. So I like it. So I would give it a 4 for style, but unfortunately the layout drags that down to a sort of mid 3. Like I say, normally it wouldn't be a problem, but just the use of space is not great, and it kind of looks like someone dumped it out of a Word document a bit too early to me. In terms of substance, I mean, it's short, sweet, to the point. You'd have to add a lot of roleplay to make it feel like 1,000 Nights in One and so on, but that's not that difficult for most people. There's not much in the way of any new rules or anything. The micro quests are useful, and the fact that you can take them out and put them elsewhere that works fine. But again, it's going to be about mid 3 in terms of substance. The micro adventures are more useful because you can use them elsewhere. But the structure of the tournament is just one of those things that sounds fantastic, but isn't really when you get down to it. So 3.5 for style, 3.5 for substance, 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. So above average, mostly for the way it evokes this moment, this setting, this historical, or sort of pre-D&D, almost pre-Tolkien sort of style of fantasy. So yeah, a mild recommend. If you have Elfking and you like it, definitely. If you play any sort of more Morcockian style of game, like is it the Black Hack, things like that, then you might also find this useful or inspirational. Zang. There are certain kinds of people, ale-drinking people, people who did a little too much acid in the 60s, people who wear large warm jumpers and take long brisk walks in the countryside. These people maintain that fairies not only exist, but that they are very common. They also tend to believe that fairies are a countryside phenomenon, much like casual cruelty to animals, sexual intercourse with sheep, and having an impenetrable and parochial accent. This is, of course, rather wide of the mark. Fairies have always had a strong relationship with man, darning his socks, cobbling his shoes, cleaning his houses, drowning him, marrying him, and swapping his children for malformed hydrocephalics as a bit of a jape, and otherwise aiding or demeaning the efforts of man. Fairies do not need our belief to exist, they need us and the things that we leave around. Like an urban fox or the aerial rat known as the pigeon, if they survive, they will have adapted to city life and found their niches, not in tending to flowers and trees, but in crashing computers, letting down the tyres on people's cars, and eating leftover pizza. Urban Fairy is a game of those kind of fairies, gone feral and urban, adapted to modern life. It's a comedy game of hijinks, weirdness and strangeness, and it almost runs itself. You want Urban Fairy Pocket Edition, which is revised and updated with better art and edited writing, and it's available from post-mort.com, DriveThruRPG, and lulu.com.